Are you a millennial looking for solid advice on money matters? Is money stressing you out? Would you like to learn about the stock markets and investing? How about cryptocurrency or maybe starting your own business? You're watching The Sovereign Life with Teresa Stewart on Channel 82.
Hey, welcome to this episode of The Sovereign Life. My name is Terry Kay, and I have the esteemed pleasure of being here with my lecturer from the Bermuda College, Mr. Simmons. And we're just going to jump right into this conversation because, Simmons, as a millennial, I have real questions. And my first question is, what the heck is going on in the economy for me as a millennial to actually create a life here?
Yeah, life has changed, and can I
be as blunt and honest as you can, sir.
Okay. Well, expect the unexpected. In the beginning, we talked about this book called The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb, and I would recommend your readers to pick it up for the simple reason that back in the day, the unexpected was just the unexpected.
Right.
Today, you should expect the unexpected. So what does that mean for you as an individual? Live beneath your means.
Right.
Stockpile. Be like a squirrel. Take risks, but calculated risks. Some of the uncalculated risks, things like credit cards, you were mentioning that earlier. Stay away from those things.
Right.
And because we live in a very uncertain world, use a simple risk management strategy, and that is a skin in the game. So with respect to credit cards, you got to ask yourself, so what's in it for the folks on the other side that are offering me the credit card?
Right.
Well, they're going to make money off of me.
Right.
So if they're making money off of me, where does that put me as a consumer? Stay away from things like that. You know, live a simple life. And if someone comes to you with a complicated idea, chances are it's not good for you. So things like cryptocurrency, you know, some folks are sort of saying, yeah, we got to get into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? That's popular. Well, when the cashier at the grocery store is talking about cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, you've missed the train.
Right.
The time to have gotten into that particular asset would have been maybe 10 years ago,
right,
when it was trading for single digits.
Okay.
And now you'd be sort of laughing all the way to the bank. But too often, I think we hear about things too late. And that's because information is precious. It's like a Birkin bag. You don't see Birkin bags all over the place. It's for a very good reason. It's a symbol of power. Well, information is also a bit of power. And those that have it will sell it to the highest bidder. And, you know, we poor people, we tend to get the third hand, fourth hand, fifth hand information, and then we sort of act on it and wonder, well, why isn't this working for me? And it's because it's old information. And, you know, you need to be at the front of the queue.
So how do we get to the front of the queue, right? Because we have studied, you and I have both studied economics. And so we know that the information that you taught me and that you learned, nothing's new, nothing's really changed. So how do we get to the front of the line knowing what we know about how the economy works? And what are some things we don't know about how the economy works?
Yeah. Well, there's some basic ideas in economics that will guide you. Simple things like supply and demand. So we've been hearing stories about the OPEC folks, the people that basically control the supply of oil on the planet, saying, well, you know, we're not going to increase the amount of oil. That's tantamount to telling you that we want the price of oil to go up. And then just last week, the United States released from its so-called Strategic Petroleum Reserve a whole bunch of oil to keep the price down. So that's simple supply and demand. And it's sort of granny's wisdom. Where you think, well, if something is plentiful, the price is going to go down. If something is scarce, it's going to drive its price up. So you in your little world can think about, so why is this happening? You know, you can think in terms of a simple supply and demand. There's a demand for a product. There's a supply of it. If a product's becoming more popular, that means the demand for it is going up. In all likelihood, its price is going to go up. So, you know, don't be surprised when the popular product becomes more expensive. That's the simple laws of supply and demand. And then the other question is, well, who's winning when prices go up? And who's winning when prices go down? So that's a really simple idea that you can apply to your life, and especially if you're an entrepreneur, because those are the folks who are at the front of the queue. They're the ones that are the risk takers. And not all entrepreneurs are going to be successful, but I'm finding that with your generation, you guys are endowed with an inordinate amount of courage. My generation, we graduated from college, and what did we do? We went to work for the man. We went to work for the government. We wanted a safe job. But you've seen that kind of loyalty to an enterprise, whether it be private or public, doesn't pay off. So I'm just so fascinated with the fact that young people are saying that we're going to sort of live the sovereign life. We're going to assume responsibility for our future. We're not going to rely on the government, or we're not going to rely on a big company to give me lifetime employment. And from a macroeconomic perspective, that is a far better way for us to go. Because in the past, it was, okay, I'm going to work for somebody else. And so you get these two pillars in the economy, international business and tourism. And these two pillars go against the concept of diversification. You guys are doing all sorts of, wonderful things. You're into entertainment, you're into retail. The ideas are just coming out of you guys, coming out of your pores. And all we need is a handful of those ideas to work. And entrepreneurs are the great job creators, not the government, not an international business. It's people like you who, when you become successful, you need people to make you look good. So you're going to need makeup artists, photographers, producers, musicians, and the ripple effect, what we call the multiplier effect, is just off the chain. And so I'm really big on entrepreneurship, but in order for that to work, entrepreneurs need access to capital.
And I actually wanted to jump in on that, because I've heard you talk about the gig economy and how the entrepreneurs were definitely the next wave of people that are actually going to save our economy. And so, what are some of the ways that entrepreneurs can get access to be able to do the things that they could need to do so that we can save, our economy?
That is arguably the biggest problem facing the local economy. I mean, in the US, you've got venture capitalists concentrated in places like Silicon Valley. And there, the mentality is, look, if you haven't failed, we're not going to lend you money if you haven't failed a couple of times. So you've got to break some eggs to get some omelets type of thing. And in Bermuda, we sort of somewhat like the Japanese, where failure is dishonorable. We need an environment, a mentality where failure is honorable. You want to go out there and learn. I try to tell my students that getting a problem right doesn't mean you understood it. Maybe you got it right, you were lucky and you got it right, and you think you got it, you understand the concept. But if you get it wrong, you ask them, so where did I go wrong? Can you help me? And so mistakes are your friends. Venture capitalists understand that. They understand that if they lend money to 100 businesses, 5 or 10 of them are going to do well. But they've already got it figured out. They've done the calculation. They say, okay, out of 100, I've got a 5% success rate. And so they sort of position themselves with that in mind. They're not thinking, okay, well, I need 95% of them to succeed. That's not how the entrepreneurship world works. And that may be part of the reason why we don't have a good venture capital market in Bermuda. We've got a Bermuda Stock Exchange, which deals with sort of large and medium-sized businesses. But startups, most will go and get debt financing. And for me, debt financing is dangerous because the person on the other end doesn't really have skin in your game. With equity financing, if I'm essentially lending you money to be a part of your game. So if your game doesn't succeed, I don't get anything. If it does succeed, I do. The downside of going that way is that now you give up power to the lender. If you go to the bank, essentially the bank doesn't have any say in how you run your business. But if I'm a shareholder, I got a say. Now, are you willing to give that power away? Well, I would say be careful who you bring in. So you're running this business, you need an injection of capital. You want to bring in someone that knows the business, not someone who's just got money, because it's just money. You need information, you need knowledge, and that knowledge is power. And if they can give you advice as to how you can proceed, that increases the probability. And venture capitalists, that's the way they roll. They're going to put money in things that they understand, that they can believe in. Mm-hmm. And that is an entrepreneur opportunity in and of itself. Venture capital, someone who can actually find folks who have got the money, pool it together, and funnel it out to people like you.
Listen, I love being in your presence because it always feels like another lecture that I've gone to, because I always learn something new. And even though I have the background in econ like yourself, you were my first econ teacher. Shout outs to you for that, because I actually decided to get a degree in economics because of you. I'm going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back to dive even deeper into the topic of how economics actually impacts us on a daily basis as a consumer.
We'll be right back after these messages.
Crimson Multimedia is a full-service video production company. We can take your next project from concept to completion. We produce small one-camera setups to complex large-scale multi-camera productions. We offer editing, visual effects, and file transfers. We also broadcast and live stream both free and pay-per-view events. Visit our website at www.crimsonmultimedia.bm for a quote or to contact us. Let Crimson Multimedia film, edit, broadcast, and stream your next event.
You're watching The Sovereign Life with Teresa Stewart on Channel 82.
Welcome back to this episode of The Sovereign Life. I am here with my guest, the premier economist, Mr. Craig Simmons. And so, Mr. Simmons, as you know, I have a parent who is of the retirement age. And one of the struggles, or I won't say struggles, one of the challenges I find is as a single income household trying to manage, her as an aging person, but then also myself trying to create a form of wealth and trying to set myself up financially. What is something that I should be looking towards doing to prepare myself for the unexpected? Because technically her pension and all of that should be taking care of her in her older years, but it's not seeming to work out that way.
That's a difficult problem because about a quarter of our population is sort of in that senior area. Mm-hmm. And we have really an upside down demographic pyramid. Back in the day, you had a bunch of young people, fewer older people, and there were enough young people to take care of the old people, but now it's the other way around. And arguably, that is going to be the great challenge for you guys. How exactly do you finance things like the pension fund? So the government pension debt in this country is somewhere around $3 billion. Now, the government debt per se, the on balance sheet is $3 billion, and now you've got this additional $3. How's that going to get paid for? When you get old, will there be any pension money around? Well, the short answer to that is it's not going to happen. So that puts more pressure on you guys. And maybe that's got something to do with the entrepreneurial spirit, because your back is up against the wall. You sort of remind me of when sort of the North Africans invaded Spain. I think it was Tariq. He's got this huge army in front of him, and it's just him and his men. And they've got to go up this hill. And he sort of says, look, the water is at our back. If we don't defeat this army, we're toast. So fight your backsides off. I think that's where you guys are. You don't have a cushion. You don't have a way out of this. And so maybe that's why you guys are so engaged into making a life for yourselves. Unlike my generation that promised themselves, but let's face it, we baby boomers promised ourselves these huge pensions that we're going to benefit from, that you guys are going to pay for. So it's sort of, our generation's a little on the selfish side. And I like to call it an intergenerational injustice that's going on. But, to your point, how exactly does your generation deal with that? And I don't have an easy answer for it. I just think I take care of my mother. And as an economist, you think, well, an efficient use of resources, how much time should I be devoting to her? And then I stop and think, well, wait a minute. When I was in diapers, 3 months old, did my mother ever ask, how much time should I devote to this particular person? It's my birthday coming up. I want to go party and do whatever. It was like, as a mother, that just goes out the window. We have to sort of use different kind of lens to manage that problem. Economics is not really gonna help you. The shoe's on the other foot. You're gonna become the new parent. You will decide when she goes to bed, what she eats, taking her to the doctor and all that kind of stuff. And it's a major task. And sometimes when you think of it from a selfish perspective, you're like, damn, wouldn't it be easier for me just to take her down to the hospital and sort of say, see ya, and the hospital call and you say, well, yeah, we're on our way, but you never actually get there. So you need a different kind of way of thinking. I just think about a mother raising a child. That kind of courage, that kind of grit that a mother must have to sort of raise a child, or even to get pregnant and spend 9 months of your life, this thing growing inside of you. As a man, I don't get that. If it was up to a guy to get pregnant, the human race would just disappear. And in that sense, women just have a different way. And Christine Lagarde, she's sort of a very famous economist, head of the European Central Bank. When talking about the financial crisis of 2008, there was a company called Lehman Brothers, an investment bank, and it really precipitated the financial crisis. But Christine Lagarde made the quip, had it been Lehman Sisters, there probably wouldn't have been a financial crisis. And what she's saying is that women have a different sort of risk profile. You guys are not so narrow. You're not so, narrow is the word. You take a broader approach. You think in sort of humanistic ways, because let's face it, economics has some severe limitations. We're talking about the household. What goes on in the household, all that beautiful stuff that produces people like you, is not counted in GDP. Now you got to think, so what idiot came up with the concept of gross domestic product? So it's only things outside the household that have value. Here's another weird thing about GDP. An environmental disaster, the cleanup of an environmental disaster boosts GDP. Again, it would only take a man to come up with such a stupid idea and to devalue what is most important in society, and that's the love and care that people get within a household. And so economics, there are some severe limitations on the way it's framed. But I'm sort of hopeful, because most of the people coming out of university nowadays look like you. They're women. And so I think it's going to really change how we think about society. I really feel sorry for the guys. So they better learn how to cook, get themselves an apron, and the roles will probably be reversed in the next 30 or 40 years. But I would think for the best.
I hope so. And what you mentioned around the pensions, because we're in as you mentioned, intergenerational problem that we have now. There are way more older folks than there are young folks that are paying into the pension fund. So obviously that's going to be constricted. By the time we get there, might not even be there for my generation to put into. So we hear a lot of conversations around, preparing for retirement, making sure you have things set up like a nest egg. And why should we be caring as millennials? Because it seems like doom and gloom. It seems like by the time I get to the age of retirement, it's probably not even going to be there for me anyway. So why should I even pay into it now? Why? Why is it important to me now? Well,
what I see coming out of this new reality that you painted, where the pension is going to be broke. Okay, you're going to pay into it. You're not getting anything out of it. What I see is young people grabbing the bull by the horns and creating their own nest egg. They're not relying on a government pension. They're saying, look, we have to do it ourselves. We have to set some money aside, and we've got to think about how we're going to do that. So rather than sort of passing that responsibility onto someone else, which is what I did, someone else is going to take care of me when I get old in terms of pension. You guys, your backs are up against the wall, very much like Tariq when he invaded Iberia way back when. And so, to my way of thinking, that makes for a better society because you can't pass the risks on. I mean, in some ways, it's cowardly to expect someone else to cover your back. And what I see in your generation is sort of the opposite of coward. It's courage. The fact that we have to do this. Our parents are not going to be there to help us, and we've got to create this bold, this brave new world. And I think you guys are well on the way. Whenever I'm talking to young people, they're always talking about how they're going to, make a difference, how they're going to start a business. The ideas are just brimming. Mm-hmm. And that's something that in all my time, I've just not seen come out of my generation. My generation was really the lazy generation. The generation before that was the beautiful one. They were the ones that went off and fought, the Nazi terror, and fought Hitler. Those were beautiful people. Their children, a bunch of lazy slobs. And now you guys come along and it's like, okay, we don't have this cushion. We've actually got to do it. And you're doing it. Now, how you're going to do it, saving, mm-hmm. Bermudians do save a significant amount of cash. Unfortunately, the economic pie is not distributed evenly. Yeah, economics is really this is a big word, plutocracy. So we live in a democracy where we believe that one man, one person, one vote. Well, in an economy, a dollar is a vote. So people with more dollars have more votes.
Right.
And we should, hopefully this is not a surprise, but the way in which the economic pie is divided up, there's this thing called the 80-20 rule, where essentially 80% of the wealth and income is controlled by 20% of the population. And if you take that a step further, you can say 80% of the wealth is controlled by 20% of 20% of the population. You do your arithmetic, 64% of the wealth is controlled by 4% of the population. And if you take that a step further, where you do 80% of 80% of 80%, if my arithmetic is correct, you're talking about half is controlled by less than 1%. So it's heavily skewed. It is a plutocracy. But that's just the nature of, I think, a capitalist society. There's no evil scheme at play. And as I'm talking about entrepreneurship, I'm really talking about inequality. Because as I mentioned earlier, of 100 entrepreneurs that set out to make their fortune, only 5 are going to make it. So we're talking about plutocracy. Mm-hmm. Inequality is something that's going to be with us for a while. Yeah, it's our choice. It's our drug of choice. The real question is, do we understand that this is an inevitable part of a capitalist framework, and not feel sort of, Terry she was successful. She made a lot of money. I don't like her. Mm-hmm. No, this is the risk that you took, mm-hmm. and we need to reward people and respect people who take the kinds of risks that you're going to take. I feel like we're sort of already there. So when we look at someone who's talented and they do well, we don't sort of feel like, we don't feel bad about it. Where we feel bad is when someone, because of they've hoodwinked someone. So someone who was perhaps, a part of the government. Nassim Taleb talks about the Rubin rule. This was a person who changed the rules with respect to government and regulation, changed them, left the government, and then joined a bank and used those rules against the government. And he made a crap load of money. And he called it the Rubin trade. So those are instances where you get people playing the system. And I think when people play the system, you don't really like that. It's like when someone drops their parent off at the hospital and doesn't pick them up. You look at that person, you say, something's wrong with you, bro. That's not cool. But for someone that, say, starts a rest home and finds an innovative way of taking care of people, and they really run a successful rest home, and they become rich doing that, you say, oh, yeah, that person's good. Or someone that comes up with a record that people like and it sells 1 million copies and they become wealthy that way. We feel like, you did something, you deserve that.
Right.
But it's the folks who play the system, and a lot of them come from the political class, which might be why, if you look at politicians a little sideways, like, what are you guys really up to? Like, what are your real intentions? They're not sort of the noble intentions of a mother taking care of children, or someone taking care of seniors.
Right.
These are sort of noble activities. And nobility and trust are so important for the proper functioning of an economy. It can't be all about me first, me second, and if there's anything left over, me again. Selfishness is not, there's a difference between selfishness and self-interest. Selfish just means I'm taking, I'm grabbing. But when I look at entrepreneurs, self-interest, entrepreneurs are some of the greatest philanthropists around. In Bermuda today, entrepreneurs are keeping people on the payroll, even though they're not making any money. They're paying their health insurance, they're paying their social insurance, even though the business isn't making any money. So an entrepreneur is oftentimes a philanthropist. They're motivated by self-interest, but what actually happens is that they're these givers, and they tend to give far more than they take, which is sort of counterproductive, because we think of entrepreneur, I'm taking, I just want to make money. But that's because I think we get confused between selfishness and self-interest. Self-interest is a different beast. It's like, I'm going to do what's in my best interest. Yeah, I want to run a business. And you take people into these businesses, and you sort of see them as family people. And now you realize that, wow, I'm responsible for this person's family. And you meet their kids, and it's like, oh man, I got to make sure that this business does well, because, this person wants to send their kids off to school, and I'm responsible. If they get sick, I got to make sure their health insurance is paid. And so entrepreneurs are like, they're not these greedy people. They're gracious people. They're noble people. But for too long in our community, I think we looked at entrepreneurs as being the man. These are just people that are out for themselves. And really, nothing could be further from the truth. Now, I'm not saying that all entrepreneurs are these noble people. You've got mixed bag. But my experience is that, like, these people are they're great human beings. Their heart is in the right place. And it's gotten to the point now where people say to me, so look, I want to do good in the world. Should I go work for a charity, or what should I do? My advice to them is start a business. Bill Gates, inadvertently, the Microsoft founder, created more black millionaires than anyone in the history of the United States. Now, I don't think Bill Gates started out thinking, I'm going to help black people. That was not on his agenda. But he ended up in doing that. Yeah. It's almost like an unintended consequence. Yeah, the indirect thing. And sometimes, we become too focused on, I want to do good. Well, but how do you do good?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is arguably the best way for a young person to do good.
I think just about any millennial watching this will definitely resonate with that, because even though most of us have full-time jobs, we tend to have something on the side that we're trying to kind of create. So I know for me personally, I feel vindicated in knowing that doing some things on the side that I'm passionate about, it's a noble act, even though it does I have confused self-interest and being selfish, because it just feels like that, because that's what the old guard says. And so I can totally appreciate that concept around entrepreneurship is definitely probably going to be the best way for us to get out of what we now know is the unexpected becoming our expected norm, because at this point, we can't keep doing things status quo as we once did because unfortunately that got us to the place that we're at
right
today,
now.
and it's not going to sustain us. Well, it's not a sustainable model anyway. I know for me personally, I know that to be true. So, Mr. Simmons, I want to give thanks to you for joining me on this episode of The Sovereign Life.
Anytime.
And I hope to have you back.
Anytime.
Perfect. Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Sovereign Life. Do make sure you connect with us on social media. And if you haven't already, tell someone you know about The Sovereign Life.
You've been watching The Sovereign Life. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching.
This Black History Month